I'm trying to do is to activate my body's defenses against aging.
You know how we always hear about loading up on antioxidants? And like avoiding stress is like the most important thing ever? Well, get this. What if I told you the key to living longer and healthier could be embracing a bit of stress? And like challenging those antioxidant beliefs. I know. Sounds kind of crazy, right? But that's exactly what we're diving into today with Dr. David Sinclair's work on aging.
Yeah, it's definitely a very different way of thinking about things. And Dr. Sinclair's not just some random wellness guy you know. He's a professor of genetics at Harvard Medical School.
Yeah.
And he co-directs their aging research center there. And he's written a ton on the subject, so he's definitely someone worth listening to.
And we know that sitting down and eating 3 meals a day is the opposite of that.
Totally. And his research goes way beyond just like looking younger. He's talking about slowing down aging in ourselves, which would impact how long we're healthy for, not just how long we live.
Exactly. He says we've basically misunderstood aging this whole time. Like it's not just this inevitable decline.
Yeah.
It's more like a loss of information inside ourselves. And if we can figure out how to protect that information, or even like bring it back, we might be able to reprogram our bodies to age slower, maybe even reverse some of it.
All right. You got me hooked. So how does stress even fit into all of this? I thought stress was like the enemy.
Well, it turns out a little bit of stress, like the right kind of stress, can be a good thing. Think about exercise. You're putting your body under stress, but it's controlled, and it makes you stronger. This idea is called hormesis, and Dr. Sinclair thinks it's a big part of why we age.
There's good stress and bad stress.
Exactly. When we challenge our bodies just enough, like with exercise or intermittent fasting, or even being exposed to different temperatures, we're basically giving ourselves a wake-up call.
And then what happens?
It's like this wake-up call makes them activate their defenses and their repair mechanisms. That makes them stronger and work better over time, like you're building up your cells to be stronger.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about antioxidants? I thought those were supposed to be like the miracle anti-aging thing.
Right. That's definitely how they were marketed for a long time.
Yeah.
And they do help neutralize those harmful free radicals. But Dr. Sinclair's research says they might not be the magic bullet we thought they were.
Really? Why not?
Well, some studies, even on like simpler organisms, have shown that just having more antioxidants doesn't necessarily mean you'll live longer. It's like taking a multivitamin. It might help, but it's not going to magically make you live to 120.
So if it's not just popping antioxidants, what is the secret?
Dr. Sinclair thinks a key piece is something called xenohormesis. It's an idea he actually helped come up with.
Okay. Xenohormesis. Sounds very sci-fi, but also very interesting. What is it?
It's actually pretty cool. So you know how plants make certain compounds to protect themselves when they're stressed out?
Yeah.
From things like drought or really hot or cold temperatures? Or even bugs eating them?
Right, like their own little defense system.
Exactly. Well, xenohormesis means that when we eat those plants,
we might benefit from those same protective compounds. It's like our bodies are borrowing some of their resilience. Whoa. So we're not just what we eat, we're what our food has been through. That's kind of wild.
It really is when you think about it. And Dr. Sinclair's research says that these compounds, which are often found in those bright colors in fruits and veggies, might have a bunch of health benefits for us too, like reducing inflammation, boosting heart health, and even protecting us from certain diseases.
So which stress plants should we be eating then?
Well, one of Dr. Sinclair's favorites is green tea, especially matcha. He starts his day with it almost every day. And there's actually scientific evidence to back up its potential longevity benefits.
Matcha makes sense. It's got all those good compounds, and it has that kind of bitter, almost stressed flavor, like it's been through something.
Exactly. That slight bitterness or astringency can be a good sign that the plant is full of those protective compounds.
So what else is on Dr. Sinclair's stress plant menu?
He's really into spinach. He eats a ton of it. And he uses olive oil a lot too.
Olive oil? I wouldn't have thought of that as a stress plant.
Olive trees grow in those really harsh, dry climates. And they produce olive oil to protect themselves in those tough conditions. Turns out that oil, full of healthy fats and antioxidants, is super good for our health too.
Interesting. So it sounds like Dr. Sinclair is all about getting these stress plants naturally through his diet instead of just relying on supplements.
Exactly. It's about that holistic approach to diet and lifestyle. And it's interesting that this focus on stress plants lines up with what people eat in places known for longevity, like the Mediterranean and Okinawa.
Right. Those diets are always praised for being healthy and helping people live longer, and they're both very plant-based. Speaking of diet, I'm curious about Dr. Sinclair's take on intermittent fasting. It's really popular right now, but he seems to actually believe it can impact our longevity genes. So, intermittent fasting, it's everywhere you look these days. But I have a feeling, knowing Dr. Sinclair, he's not just following some trend. How does he connect this to living longer?
Yeah, you're right. He's definitely not about those trendy diets. He sees intermittent fasting as another way we can use hormesis, using those periods of controlled stress to make us healthier.
Okay, but most people think of stress as a bad thing, especially when it comes to food. So how does that work with fasting?
Well, think about it. Our ancestors didn't have grocery stores and refrigerators. They went through cycles of having lots of food and then not much at all. And our bodies evolved to handle those periods of not eating.
That makes sense. We weren't really designed to be constantly snacking all day long.
Exactly. And what Dr. Sinclair's research shows is that those times when we don't eat might actually be just as important for our health as the food we do eat.
Okay, I'm listening. But I gotta be honest, I'm a little skeptical. How can not eating be good for you?
It's all about what goes on inside ourselves when we fast. Our body goes into a different mode. It's like this cleanup crew gets to work.
A cleanup crew, what are they cleaning up exactly?
So during fasting, our cells start to break down and recycle old or damaged parts. It's called autophagy. Basically, giving your cells a refresh, getting rid of all the junk that builds up over time.
Interesting. So it's like hitting the reset button on our cells.
Exactly. And here's the really cool part. Intermittent fasting also activates those longevity genes we were talking about, the sirtuins.
Right. Those genes are like our body's own anti-aging system. They help repair our DNA and keep our cells healthy.
Exactly. And when you combine intermittent fasting with other healthy habits, like eating those stress plants we discussed, it creates this synergy that makes those good effects even stronger.
So it's not just about being hungry all the time. It's about timing your meals strategically.
You got it. And more research is showing that intermittent fasting could have a lot of health benefits, from better insulin sensitivity and less inflammation, to maybe even protecting against neurodegenerative diseases.
Okay. You've convinced me. Now I'm really curious. What does Dr. Sinclair actually do for intermittent fasting?
He usually does what's called time-restricted feeding, meaning he eats all his meals within a certain window of time each day.
How long is his eating window?
He tries to stick to about 6 hours, usually skips breakfast, has a light lunch if he needs it, and then a healthy vegan dinner.
Wow. So basically one main meal per day. I gotta be honest, I don't know if I could do that. I get pretty hungry by lunchtime.
He does make sure to stay really well hydrated throughout the day. Lots of water, tea, coffee, and if he gets hungry between meals, he'll have some nuts to hold him over.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Sometimes you just need a little something. So it seems like there are different ways to do intermittent fasting, and it's all about finding what works for you.
Exactly. And of course, it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor before making any big changes to your diet, especially if you have any health conditions.
Very good point. So we've covered what Dr. Sinclair eats and when he eats. But what about the things he avoids? Are there any foods he considers the bad guys? Foods he considers the bad guys. That's definitely interesting. So what does Dr. Sinclair say we should be avoiding, or at least cutting back on?
One of the biggest ones for him is sugar. And not just the obvious stuff like candy and soda. He's really worried about all the added sugar hiding in processed foods. Even things that seem kind of healthy, like fruit juice.
Right. Those sugary drinks can really mess with your blood sugar. But why is he so focused on blood sugar when it comes to aging?
It all comes down to this process called glycation. You know how when you heat sugar for too long, it gets all caramelized and sticky?
Yeah, like making caramel sauce.
Exactly. Well, glycation is kind of like that. But it's happening inside our bodies. When our blood sugar is always high, those sugar molecules start attaching to proteins and fats, almost like caramelizing them.
Okay, that's kind of scary. And what does that do to us?
Over time, it causes damage and inflammation all over our bodies, which makes us age faster. It increases the risk of all those age-related diseases.
Wow. So those blood sugar spikes aren't just bad for our energy. They're literally aging us from the inside out. No more sugary drinks for me. Anything else we should watch out for?
Dr. Sinclair also steers clear of refined carbs, like white bread and pasta. He used to love bread. But he noticed a big difference in how he felt. More energy and just overall healthier when he cut back.
How come? I thought carbs were just for energy.
Well, refined carbs get broken down into sugar really quickly in our bodies. And like we talked about, that leads to those blood sugar roller coasters. Dr. Sinclair believes those ups and downs not only mess with our energy, but they also contribute to aging.
So it's about choosing the right kind of carbs.
Exactly. Going for complex carbs from veggies, whole grains, legumes gives you steady energy without those crazy blood sugar swings.
Got it. Complex carbs over refined carbs. What about meat? What's his take on that?
Dr. Sinclair's actually really cut back on meat over the years. He used to eat it regularly, but he found that focusing more on plant-based protein made his health markers look a lot better.
Is he vegetarian now?
I think he mostly follows a vegan diet now, but he sometimes has fish for the omega-3s. His view is that meat's not necessarily bad, but it's about being mindful of how much you eat and choosing plant-based protein more often.
So again, it's about finding that balance, not going to extremes.
Exactly. And that's something super important to remember. What works for one person might not work for another. It's always best to talk to your doctor or a registered dietitian to figure out the best way to eat for you.
Absolutely. Now, I know Dr. Sinclair's talked about supplements before. Does he take any himself?
He does. But it's really important to point out that he's not trying to sell any specific brand or make money from supplements. He always says they should be supplemental, as in they're not a replacement for a healthy diet and lifestyle.
Right. Supplements shouldn't be a Band-Aid?
Exactly. So with that said, let's look at a few he's mentioned. One he takes every day is resveratrol. You might know it as that antioxidant found in red wine.
Ah, so that's where that whole glass of red wine a day thing comes from. But seriously, what's so great about resveratrol?
Well, some early research suggests it might have a bunch of benefits, like lowering inflammation and maybe even protecting against heart disease. It's even been linked to activating those SU2 genes we talked about.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Is it like a fountain of youth or something?
The research is promising, but it's still early days. We need more long-term studies to really understand what resveratrol can do.
Makes sense. What else is on his list?
Another one he takes is NMN, short for nicotinamide mononucleotide.
Okay. I'm not going to lie, I have no idea what that is.
So NMN is a molecule that helps increase NAD+ levels in our bodies.
And NAD+ is?
Think of NAD+ like the energy currency of our cells. It's a coenzyme that's super important for everything our cells do, from making energy to repairing DNA. Problem is, our NAD+ levels naturally go down as we age.
Ah, so NMN is like giving our cells more energy to keep working their best as we get older.
Exactly, like recharging your cellular batteries. Early research hints that boosting NAD+ with NMN could be good for our metabolism, brain function, even muscle health. But again, more research is needed.
Fascinating. Okay, last but not least, any other supplements in Dr. Sinclair's routine?
The last one's a little different. It's actually a medication usually used to treat type 2 diabetes, called metformin.
Interesting. Why would he be taking a diabetes medication if he doesn't have diabetes?
That's the thing. Metformin has shown some really interesting potential in longevity studies, even in folks without diabetes. Seems like it might protect against some age-related diseases.
Huh. So another potential tool for living longer. But something tells me we shouldn't just go out and start taking metformin on our own.
Definitely not. Metformin is a serious medication. Should only be taken if your doctor prescribes it.
Good to know. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into Dr. David Sinclair's approach to longevity. It's given me a lot to think about.
It really has. And I think the biggest takeaway is we're not just along for the ride when it comes to aging. We have more control than we think. And understanding the science behind it lets us make better choices for longer, healthier lives.
It's empowering to know we have some say in how we age.
Absolutely. I think Dr. Sinclair's work really encourages us to see aging differently, not as this scary, inevitable thing, but as a journey of discovery and growth. It's about making healthy choices, challenging what we think we know, and never being afraid to ask, how can we live our best lives at every age?
Perfectly said. And on that note, we'll leave you to keep exploring these ideas. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the science of aging.